Hello and welcome to the Sober Bliss podcast with me, Gail, and my amazing guest. I finally quit drinking for good in March of 2018, and one of the things that helped me was connecting with people on the same journey as me, hearing their stories and finding inspiration. No matter where you are on your journey to sobriety, I hope you enjoy listening to these stories and hope they bring you inspiration, joy and light so you can find your own sober bliss. Hi everyone and welcome to another edition of Sober Bliss Meets. This is actually the first podcast of 2022, so Happy New Year everybody. Today I'm joined by my lovely friend Sophie, and Sophie, you might have seen her on Instagram. If you haven't, then check her out, and she's known as the Wolf You Feed. Hi Sophie.
Hi Gail, thanks for having me. I feel very honoured to be on your first episode of 2022.
I know, it's exciting. I just realised that as I was saying it is the first one of 2022. Let's hope it's the first of many and we have a good year.
Absolutely.
This year. So how are you? How was your Christmas and New Year?
I'm very well. Yes, Christmas and New Year was good. I took a break, which was really great and needed, just to, take a step back and remember how important it is to create space and, nourish a good wolf. So I've come into this year feeling really refreshed and ready to go. Yeah. How was yours?
Yeah, similar, quiet. Because it'd been a bit hectic all the way through the summer and I didn't really have a break actually. So it was really nice to just slow down and spend time with the family. And it's really cold here, so it is just the perfect time to kind of get under a blanket with a book and sit in front of the fire, because that's what I've been doing for the past couple of weeks.
Lovely. That feels like a distant memory to me over here in Australia because it's so hot. So I'm looking forward to some snuggly blanket weather if it comes.
Yeah, I know. It's so weird to not have Christmas in the cold. I don't know.
Do you know, it's actually one thing that I still can't get my head around over here. Halloween's the first one where the kids are all sort of trick-or-treating in shorts and in daylight. And then Christmas, I'll often get invitations to Christmas barbecues. So I'm not quite used to that.
No.
And, all the Christmas, actually there's lots of houses that put up amazing Christmas lights here. But sort of have to wait until about 10 to go out and see them because it's light so late. But it's also lovely, being able to go to the beach and, have a sunbake or have a swim on Christmas Day. So it's gorgeous as well.
Yeah. Oh, because you're not from Australia, are you? You live there, but where are you from, Sophie?
I live here. So I've been here 3 years almost, or 2.5 years. I grew up in Switzerland for the first part of my childhood and then moved to England when I was about 12. I was there for the remainder of my teens and most of my 20s, and did a lot of traveling around in my 20s and then came here 2.5 years ago.
Yeah. So you've got experience of cold Christmases, white Christmases, I would imagine, in Switzerland.
Very white. Yeah, they're gorgeous over there. And actually, a lot of my family still live there. So it's gorgeous seeing all the photos of them in their sort of, their snow gear up on the mountain. And it's very, very traditionally Christmas over there. You go candle dipping and the Christmas market and lots of snow. It's gorgeous. Yeah, so quite a contrast now.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Would you like to, I don't know what to ask you first, actually. I think people will be really intrigued to learn a little bit more about the wolf you feed. And you did mention that in the beginning, how you nourished your wolf. Do you want to explain what is the wolf you feed?
Absolutely. So the Wolf You Feed is, so I'm an addiction recovery coach,
Yeah.
and the Wolf You Feed is my company, my brand, and the name came about based off actually an old parable that I'll read to you, and then we can
Yeah.
go from there. So it's based on a very old parable, a favorite of mine. And it starts with an old Cherokee is teaching his grandson about life. A fight is going on inside me, he said to the boy. It is a terrible fight, and it is between two wolves. One is evil. He is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. He continued, the other is good. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. The same fight is going on inside you and inside every other person too. The grandson thought about it for a minute and then asked his grandfather, which wolf will win? And the old Cherokee simply replied, the one you feed. And so
Oh,
this, I really am in love with this parable, and
yeah.
I find it really lends itself very well, very strongly to recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Because in my own experience and in the experience of many others that I know in recovery, um, the maintenance of that recovery really lies in feeding that good wolf.
Yeah.
Um, and really bringing that one to the forefront. So that's the background of the name.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it. And it's so true. Because there are kind of two sides to all of us, maybe sometimes multiple sides. And it is important that we look after the version of ourselves, I suppose, that we want to be. And it's such a lovely way of explaining it to people. It's a really
Yeah,
nice story. Thank you.
yeah, and it's a really great reminder. At any point of the day, actually, for anyone in recovery or not, um, to think, stop and think: Am I feeding my good wolf, or which wolf am I feeding
Yeah.
right now? Just that moment to stop and think and go, actually, am I serving myself with this decision I'm making or this thing that
Mm.
I'm doing? So it's a really valuable
Mm-hmm.
sort of tool, I suppose,
Yeah.
and thought process to have.
Yeah. It is. It is. So you are a addiction and recovery coach, and I would imagine that you chose this wonderful path because of your own experiences with being in recovery yourself. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your own journey and experiences?
Yeah, of course. So drinking for me started sort of mid-teens. It was after I'd come back to the UK,
Mm-hmm.
and in the UK, it's fairly cultural to get stuck in fairly early, and
Yeah.
it was always it was always very much part of any social experience that
Mm.
I was part of from a very early age back in England. And I also had started working in a pub on the restaurant sort of side.
Yeah.
So I was very much surrounded by drinking and that culture, which I realized, now many years later, that the normalization of drinking
Mm.
was probably quite a big factor in how the progression happened for me into
Mm-hmm.
addiction, because it started off as being this social butterfly and always going out and drinking always being part of that,
Yeah.
um, but over time it became everything. It became an addiction, unfortunately. So in my 20s, I went to uni, and it was, drinking was still part of my life. I then sort of went back into the restaurant industry after university, because I just love food and, love that environment. And the normalcy really kind of ramped up there. And what also happened was actually, because we were working such long hours, it became a way to relax as well. So, someone might say at the end of the shift, oh, let's have a drink, and it might just be a glass of wine. But over time, over years, actually, it became a bit more normal that if someone came in at lunchtime and offered us a drink, we'd just have it at lunchtime, because it was very normal to have a drink. Everyone was coming in to have a drink at lunch, so it seemed absolutely perfectly normal to do the same thing. The progression, though, did increase, and the volume increased a lot. And things like blackouts would start happening, but because we were quite a tight-knit group of people working there, it was often laughed off and things like that. And what also then started happening was, hair of the dog in the morning became really appealing for all of us. We were all tired, we were all hungover. So a Bloody Mary or something like that in the morning started becoming very normal. I did realise I was feeling exhausted, probably not putting two and two together and thinking, well, actually, if I just cut out the drink, I could probably carry on in this industry. But I decided to get out of the industry. But by that point, it was very, very much ingrained in my lifestyle. And it was very much my crutch for everything, managing any type of emotion, handling any type of situation, all of that sort of stuff. Because the drinking had got to quite a high level, I'd actually started drinking in secret quite a lot. The shame had started growing. People had been noticing around me that it was a problem. I realised it was something I couldn't stop very easily. So I would do these stints of giving up for a few weeks here or there and feel great, but actually, slowly it would creep in again. And through a lot of embarrassment and shame, a lot of that would then ramp up in secret, because I just didn't want to admit to others, but actually, to myself as well, that it was happening all over again. I had many bad sort of rock bottoms, but none of them were quite bad enough at the time. They were horrendous at the time, but still not quite bad enough. But actually, my older brother, ended up coming to visit me and voice his concern, and he approached it with a level of compassion and non-judgment that really stopped me from going inward and recoiling. And actually, I started being a bit more open to the fact that this was something that maybe needed to be looked at. So he and I decided on a plan, and that was for me to go to rehab in Thailand for 5 weeks. And he's amazing. He actually flew out there. And I was there for 5 weeks, which was a really eye-opening and tough and challenging process. But it was also very liberating and a huge relief, to realize that life was possible without that crutch.
What was it like there, Sophie? If you don't mind telling us a little bit more about Thailand and what you did there.
Yeah, of course. So the moment we landed, I already felt a huge amount of relief, mainly because I'd removed myself from my environment. Yes, it's a very good way of doing it. I appreciate it's not always something that can be done, but for me, it really, really helped just being really far away. And there was humidity in the air. There was a different scent in the air. There was a different culture to embrace. Obviously, when I got to rehab, I was anxiety ridden, and I'd been sort of tapering off alcohol along the way. So I wasn't in a very healthy state when I got there. And I was very nervous. But as soon as I met a lot of the other people that were there, that went away. And I realized, gosh, there's a whole spectrum of people here, and it was just such a varied group that it normalized recovery rather than normalizing the drinking, and it was really refreshing. And the program was it was based quite heavily around CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy, and also one-to-one therapy. We all had a different therapist or psychologist that we worked with.
Yeah.
Group sessions as well. So they were based around either a theme or a topic that we would all share about, or they would be a sort of open forum, and the first one to speak would basically create the topic.
Right.
And then there was, there was a beautiful fitness area and a swimming pool, and nutrition was a big part of it as well. And then also 12-step was part of it. That was an element I found very tricky to integrate with while I was there. But nevertheless, it was a really holistic approach to looking at addiction and recovery. There was a lot of knowledge absorbing. There was a lot of workbook exercises, a lot of homework and things like that. But as well as that, there was a lot of time for reflection and sleep and processing. I think, and processing was such a big part of it because, a lot of the sessions were really heavy.
Yeah.
So the processing was equally as important in its own way. It sometimes felt like I was drifting around a little bit, but actually I noticed that a lot of that processing time would be having chats with other people there or just sitting in my room and journaling. So it was a very nourishing experience, actually.
Yeah.
And it was quite a small group. There was probably 10 of us maximum there. So very special experience.
Yeah.
Challenging.
Yeah, it sounds both lovely, nourishing, but also challenging as well.
Yeah, and the biggest learning curve I had from that experience was leaving, because while I was there, it was a very cushioned and protected environment, and when I left, it was quite different. Suddenly I was in the big world again.
Yes.
There were bottle shops everywhere. There was bars. There were restaurants. There was not the same level of accountability, so it was a very different way of approaching life. But luckily we've been given a big set of tools and things to apply, but it was quite a steep learning curve actually coming back into the real world after that. I actually ended up going to stay. I didn't feel ready to go back to Europe. There was still a little bit of residue in my mind with a few topics that meant I wasn't quite ready to go back. So I went to stay with a friend in Indonesia, one of my favorite places to be. And that was really nice to do a sort of halfway point, and gather myself there. I popped back to the UK. I actually then had some work in Mexico. So I was in Mexico, and then in Sumatra, and then back to Indonesia. It was quite a wobbly time, actually, there. And when I got back to the UK, I got back into work and, felt really good. But after a few months, I actually realized that some of these tools were slipping away. Some of my practices were slipping away. I was feeling quite ungrounded. So, actually, as things happened, there was a contract that was coming to a close anyway. So I decided to take 6 months off and go back to Bali and spend time on my recovery.
Yeah.
And it was actually there where I met a recovery coach who's been a very, very important part of my own journey. Yeah. And that's whom I really learned a lot of these, my own practices through, and tools and things like that, and really realized how important it is to, have that ongoing maintenance of recovery, because it's a lifelong practice, isn't it? So it's these things like rehab are a fantastic, amazing tool, but it's in the maintenance that, you know, it's the maintenance that then defines the long-term recovery, I believe.
Yeah, it is, because it's a lifestyle, really, as opposed to like a quick fix. You know, you can't just remove the alcohol, but unless you kind of work on the issues underneath, um, then there's a chance that the alcohol could creep back in, and you can't work on your life in a couple of months. As you say, it's a lifelong process, which I think makes it exciting. You know, not if someone had told me that when I was still drinking, I would have thought, oh, what? I have to do this forever for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But actually, quite the opposite is true, because you just learn so much about yourself, and you discover things about yourself that you'd either forgotten or have just suddenly appeared. And it is exciting to be on this path of discovery, I like to say, because that's what it
Yeah,
is.
and yeah, it is, and you know, I noticed while I was feeling ungrounded, I felt like I was white knuckling my recovery and really struggling through it for the sake of carrying on, because I knew it was necessary and it was essential and I couldn't go back and all those kind of things.
Yeah.
But it was a real white knuckle roller coaster ride. Whereas with learning the practices and tools to have an enriched and nourished recovery, it became this beautifully enjoyable process, and, you know, really something that I now love every day. All those practices and the awareness and the openness and, you know, all of those sorts of things.
Yeah. So, what are some of the tools then that you use to help keep you on this wonderful path?
For me, routine and habits are a really big part of my recovery. There's a little bit of a misconception sometimes that they can mean that, you know, life gets smaller and rigid, but actually my experience is that it's much more liberating and freeing to have routine and habits. So when I was particularly ungrounded, that looked very strict. You know, I had a sort of hour by hour timetable, but that was essential at the time, because anything less than that would have been too overwhelming, or, you know, big goals would have been too overwhelming. So it was very much bite-sized chunks. Whereas that over time, as the habits came into play, that got a little bit less and less. So it's you know, it's more relaxed now, but there's still a strict routine in terms of I don't really give it a miss.
Yes.
I've noticed sometimes, I don't know about you, when sometimes I think, oh, I'll be okay. I'll just take a break today. And actually the rest of the day I can feel really ungrounded. And I think, gosh, that's because I didn't do X, Y, and Z. Do you ever feel that?
Yeah, I do. I do morning pages now. I didn't used to. I've been doing that for maybe about 5 or 6 months. So basically, the first thing you do when you wake up is you just fill 3 pages of whatever is in your head. And it was difficult to get into. But now I feel like something's off if I don't do it. You're so right. It does. I think you notice when it's gone just how much you really relish the practice, whatever it might be, yoga or swimming or walking or journaling, meditating, whatever it is. So yeah, and it is so interesting, especially I didn't think I would ever be the type of person who would journal or meditate. But now that I do, I can't imagine not doing it.
Yeah. And there is, I think it's also important to, you know, be aware with ourselves that there can be flexibility in the routine. So, for example, one of my morning routines is a yoga practice. If I have time, then I do 90 to 120 minutes. You know, I do a really long practice.
Yeah.
But sometimes that's just not possible.
Yeah.
And so instead of not doing it at all, sometimes I'll actually just go and sit on my mat for 5 minutes, or do a 15-minute practice, or do some breathing, or do one part of that practice, because it's actually the process of going through the motions rather than necessarily the whole process that we can get a huge amount of nourishment as well. So, you know, like yours, if you were in a rush, it could just be 5 minutes, couldn't it? One page.
Exactly.
You know, just to kind of make sure it's still there. And I think it's always better to do a little bit than nothing at all. Because as soon as we miss it once, we're more likely to miss it again. And actually that's where the new habit starts of not doing that thing. So it can kind of unravel quite quickly.
Yeah, it can. And yeah, I think it's important for people to remember that they don't have to commit to, like you say, an hour and a half of yoga every day, or 20 minutes meditation, or 3 pages of journaling, because that's too much to think about in the beginning. But just commit to, maybe, as you said, getting the yoga mat out. Do that for a week, then maybe work up to sitting on it. Or if you want to journal, just put your pen next to your journal and do that for a week, and then build up, because it's much easier to stick with a practice like that if you build it up slowly, so it feels good, not forced upon you.
Absolutely. And our brains also then get used to that pattern of behavior. Even like you said, if it's getting the book out and the pen, the next day our brains will start thinking about doing that. Whether we write in it or not doesn't really matter. It's a little bit like thinking about, you know, someone who does a marathon doesn't necessarily start training a full marathon day one. You know, they might go for a walk and then do a 5K walk, and you know, it's the build up. And it's in that build up that those goals become a lot more realistic and actually become habits that stick, rather than things that we try and then potentially get a little bit overwhelmed by or put off by, because they're too hard work, and then don't do at all.
That's so true. So what would you say to anybody then who's listening to this and thinking, okay, I'm not really happy with the way things are going with my drinking? Maybe they can't realistically go to rehab in Thailand, much as they might like to. So what would you recommend that their next step might be? Because journaling and yoga, lovely as they are, probably are not going to do everything that needs to be done.
Absolutely. I mean, as a very, very first step, there's the courage to do something, however small that is. I think that's a really big part to remember, that, you know, it takes a huge amount of courage to change something that we already know, even if it's that we know it's not good for us. But in terms of a sort of action-based thing, I would really, really recommend that people find a community-based activity in terms of a recovery community. All of those things like journaling are amazing tools, but I believe that community aspect is really crucial, especially at the beginning, whether that's going to a 12-step meeting, you know, online, very accessible. I used to go to one in Hollywood, or, you know, go to one in Spain. You know, you can really go anywhere in the world on these things.
Zoom.
Or you can go to an in-person one. I do know a few people that have anxiety challenges. So online can be a really great way to step in, put a toe in and just even listen in without even speaking, which can be a bit more of an appealing idea. But then there's obviously other community-based programs or, groups like yours, Gail, where being able to be in another environment where other people are experiencing or have experienced what you're going through is such a powerful thing in recovery, because all the journaling in the world it doesn't quite have the same effect as speaking to another person with lived experience or going through the same experience.
Yeah, that's so true, because we think that we're the only ones that this is happening to. We think, it's just me who's got these crazy thoughts, or it's just me who can't, put the drink down. What's wrong with me? But actually, when we do speak to other people, we realize that, there's nothing wrong with us. It just so happens that there's this addictive substance which is causing us problems in our lives, and it's causing other people problems. And I think it's a comfort to know that actually there's nothing wrong with me. I just need a little bit of help to get through this, and having people there, like you say, to support you, or who understand, or just there to listen to you cry if that's what you need. It just make a huge difference.
Huge. And actually that's such an amazing point, that holding space for someone, or having space held for you is such an amazing and powerful thing, isn't it?
It is.
In terms of communities, you might find this as well. Places like Instagram are just vast with support. And so even if, we were talking about steps earlier, if the steps to go to a meeting or to join a group call is a little bit overwhelming, then starting by, if you're on Instagram, following, some accounts that talk about recovery. There's some great podcasts out there. Recovery Elevator is a really good one that he interviews people at all different stages of recovery, many of them at very, very early stages, 10 days or 20 days or 80 days. And hearing other people's stories in early recovery can be really helpful as well.
Yeah, it can. I think, as I said, it's just so comforting to hear other people's stories that you can relate to, and it just gives you that sense of empowerment as well. So if somebody else can do it, then there's no reason why I can't do it as well, which is inspirational.
Absolutely. And it builds that courage, to keep going with it, because our brains will often start saying, oh, you're okay, go back to it. Whereas being surrounded by other people that are either, in the same boat or reminders as to why this is a better path, it only strengthens that courage. And like you said, is super empowering.
Yeah, it is. So your life now then, Sophie, must look very different to what it did before. What is, and then this is probably a difficult question, the best thing or a couple of really amazing things that you love about being alcohol free?
Oh, what a great question. And there are so many things. At the core, I would say there's an inner peace that can be sometimes quite difficult to describe, but there's a calmness inside that, I used to be riddled with anxiety, or, oh God, what happened last night? Or who did I upset? Or, did I run anyone out? Just all that fear and anxiety. And so now I live with this real inner peace that actually, there are all these different strands that come off that. There's better sleep, there's better nutrition, there's better relationships with people. My core values have come back to the surface. You know, they got very much put into a box underneath the stairs, and that was part of the feeding of the addiction, because I knew they were there but I wasn't using them. So they've come back to the forefront. I live with integrity and you know, with all these things that just feel so wonderful now, as well as the physical things as well. You know, I feel healthier and I am healthier for it. I have more energy, and like I mentioned, I sleep better. I'm much more present with my time, and it's endless.
It is. And it's true what they say. It sounds a bit cliche, but it is, you know, sobriety is the gift that just keeps on giving, because the more time you have alcohol free, then the more you get to experience all of these wonderful benefits and discover, you know, what else might be out there waiting for you that you would never get the opportunity to experience if you're living in the small world that, you know, drinking does create for ourselves. But yeah, I can relate to that feeling of calmness and just that feeling of contentment, I suppose. And some people might think, oh gosh, that's quite boring. And it is, but do you know what? It's lovely. Like there's nothing
It's delicious.
nicer, yeah, than just sitting there, I don't know, with a book or going out for a walk and just feeling good in that moment, just because, not because, you know, you've enhanced it with anything or whatever. It's just nice. Really, really
Absolutely.
nice.
Yeah, it's a really delicious feeling. And I think you know, there are still challenges in life, aren't there, in recovery, and almost stronger in some ways because there's no blocks on the emotions. So things can sometimes feel really strong, you know, really strong, emotion wise, or getting through a sticky situation, or, you know, all of that sort of stuff. But what I've really noticed is, you know, I'm able to get through those better, even if they're hard. And knowing the decisions I'm making are with clarity and with best intentions in mind. And that's a lovely feeling as well, you know, working through stuff, but doing it with clarity.
Yeah, not kind of blindly blundering through as we might have done in the past. And for my own experience, if you know, I've got two kids. Well, one of them's 20, so he's not really a child anymore. But I would often, when I was drinking, I would shout at them for no reason, or I would think that they'd given me good reason to be annoyed, but actually it wasn't. So obviously the house is a lot calmer. But if I do have to have a word with them or tell them off, it's for a genuine reason. It's not because I'm hungover or I've had too much to drink and, you know, there's no boundaries or anything there. So that's a lovely thing, being myself again, I suppose.
Yeah, such a lovely feeling to find oneself again on this process, which can take a while. You know, I think I felt very lost for a while. Because boundaries were out of the window. My values were still under the cupboard in a box. You know, all of those things, and there were a lot of relationships to rebuild or, you know, work on. So that wasn't there immediately. But I think when we can really really have a belief in what we're doing is right, with a long-term view of this is going to pay off because I'm doing everything right, we do then start seeing those benefits, and it's really gorgeous because, you know, they just keep coming and coming, which is lovely.
Yeah, they do. Oh, well, thank you, Sophie, so much. Just before we go, I will put a link to your Instagram handle, and could you just tell everybody again what that is?
Yeah, for sure. So it's the_wolfyouFeed.
Mm-hmm.
And my website is thewolfyouFeed.com.
.com. Okay, I'll put that in as well. And are you anywhere else apart from Instagram? Are you on Facebook or anything?
No, I'm not actually. I'm just on those two for now.
I think that's enough. Good.
Keeps me busy.
Yeah. Okay.
There's actually, sorry, I just meant to mention on the website, near the bottom, there's a link to the journal, and there's quite a lot of writings by me on there, just short ones about early recovery or neuroscience of addiction and habits and things like that, if anyone's interested to have a read.
Wow. Yeah, I'm sure there will be. I'll go check that out as well. Okay. So thank you so much, Sophie. Is there anything that you'd like to say, final word, just before we go?
Well, just thank you so much for having me on, and thank you for strengthening my recovery by having this gorgeous conversation and sense of community and everything. I've really enjoyed it, so thank you.
Oh, thank you for coming on again, because this is the second time we've met, isn't it? To do the podcast.
It is, but I love our chat, so it's actually great.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed
Sophie.
this episode, then please share and subscribe. For more help and support, go to the Sober Bliss website, soberbliss.com. Connect with me on social media and learn how I can help you quit drinking and start living.